Good evening, hello and welcome to this edition of the brand new Startup Central. I'm Nayantara Rai in New Delhi. Stay in touch with us, folks. This is the show only of its kind on Indian television, dedicated, of course, to startups, but also entrepreneurship, venture capitalists, angel investors, disruption, innovation, anything that has to do with the new economy. You can stay in touch with us on our email address. It's on your screen. I'm also on Twitter. So tell us what you want to see on the show, what you don't want to see on the show. You can even pitch to us to be a part of Startup Central. Now, this Monday is the first edition of Startup Central after India's first full-time woman finance minister presented her maiden budget. Nirmala Sitharaman's budget speech had some parts dedicated to startups, where she spoke about the importance that startups are playing to the new economy, to the new India. She has also maybe laid to rest the entire demons as far as that entire angel tax issue goes, and clearly wants to give a thrust to entrepreneurship. Over the next 60 minutes, I'm going to get experts on the show who are going to be discussing if it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Has enough been done for the startup universe? But before we go to that, and before I introduce all of my panelists, let's just remind you and get to the highlights of Nirmala Sitharaman's speech that was dedicated for the startup universe.
Startups in India are taking firm roots, and their continued growth needs to be encouraged. To resolve the so-called angel tax issue, I'm sure a lot of members are concerned on this issue. To resolve the so-called angel tax issue, the startups and their investors who file requisite declarations and provide information in their returns will not be subjected to any kind of scrutiny in respect of valuation of share premiums. The issue of establishing identity of the investor and source of his funds will be resolved by putting in place a mechanism of e-verification, so there's no man-to-man interface there. With this, funds raised by startups will not require, the funds raised by startups will not require any kind of scrutiny from the income tax department. In addition, special administrative arrangements shall be made by the Central Board of Direct Taxes for pending assessments of startups and redressal of their grievances. It will be ensured that no inquiry or verification in such cases be carried out by the assessing officer without obtaining approval of his supervisory office. So the element of discretion with which startups were suffering has been removed.
And now let me introduce all of my panelists right here joining us on Startup Central. Thank you very much. Joining me to discuss the budget 2019 is Sharat Sharma, the co-founder at iSpirit, Prasun Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Satvico. He's also the charter member of TiE Delhi. Neha Singh, the founder and CEO of Traxen. And we're also being joined by Ashish Fafadia, the member of IVCA, and also a part of Bloom Ventures. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on this very special edition of Startup Central. Sharat, let me begin with you. You're joining us from our Bengaluru studio. You've had enough time to go through the fine print of Budget 2019, what Nirmala Sitharaman has had to say. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you want to rate the budget for the startup universe? Has it been path-breaking in any form?
No, I don't think I can give it a very high rating. The promise is there. I think many of us are looking for signs for Startup 2.0 policy to emerge, and the budget would have been a good place to start that kind of launch of that a new set of policies, and that hasn't happened. So I am frankly disappointed by the budget.
Okay, you're disappointed. Ashish, if I could come to you now, going into the big event on Friday, the budget speech, we were talking about what all Nirmala Sitharaman could do. You were part of a very special discussion on that. Having said that, while she talked about startups, the importance of startups for the new economy, she also addressed an old issue, which was angel tax. All of you have been very worried about angel tax. Would you say that was the only expectation going into budget 2019? At least, are you happy it's been dealt with?
So I definitely would not say that I'm disappointed. At the same time, one always has so much more that one can do. However, let me just try and bring this answer into two parts. When we spoke last week, we did discuss some of the issues, particularly the challenge of angel tax and the whole way in which Cat 2 AIFs can be brought at par with Cat 1. So some of those issues that we spoke of were kind of addressed. However, there were a few points that definitely the industry needs to be addressed as well. So overall, there definitely is a clear intent to take care of the requirements and needs of the startup industry. That too in both parts, the startups themselves, plus the members of the investing community as well. So I definitely feel that from an intent standpoint, this budget does take care of some of these issues. However, when you take a look at some of these issues, they ideally should have been resolved in the past as well. And now that they have been resolved, it definitely helps. What is a little disappointed, Nentara, is the fact that we continue to have a situation where the asset class, startup as an asset class, does not have parity with the other asset classes. We really need to be acknowledging the fact that if we are going to grow at 8%, near about 8 or even more than 8, that is going to happen on the back of a very successful new economy integration with the old. Both will run in tandem, and people will have to adopt that, recognize the fact that startups are going to be very integral to the industry. So doing a little more is not something which is unreasonable. The expectations were that we should definitely do more, but on in all, reasonably balanced and okay to start with.
Okay to start with, balanced to start with. Neha, let me come to you. Your startup is pretty much dedicated for putting startups and venture capitalists together. You have a repository of the kind of information that venture capitalists and angel investors look forward to. I know it's a weekend in the middle, but have you had a chance to maybe speak with some of the people that you feature on your startup, the investors, etc.? What's been the reaction from that community?
So I think on an average, people are happy about the fact that the government is recognizing this and wants to do, at least there is a good intention to want to do something for the startups. I think that is very encouraging. There has been a lot of broader things which has been talked about. There are a lot of small things also which the government has done which might help the startups overall in both the taxation, ease of doing business. Small things like the way the framework of carry forward of, say, losses which would impact sort of some of the companies. There is also intention to set up more business and tech incubators, which the aim is to basically encourage more entrepreneurs to take the plunge. There is easing of things like, the labor laws from the current wide variety to 4 labor codes, which should increase the ease of doing business overall. And there are also a lot of other small things, for instance, relaxation in terms of the FDI limit in insurance intermediaries, which will encourage more capital to be available for the sector for investing in business and technology. So I think, overall there's sort of good intention to do. And obviously the one thing which impacts a lot of startups most is probably on the angel tax aspect. So it's I think what is encouraging to see is that the government has at least recognized this as a pain point and wants to do something about to ease it. Till now, a lot of the initiatives which have been done, for instance, even of the startup certificate, etc., were more to do with the future potential cases. Now, a lot of us are also sort of eager to see as to what happens after this budget to all the variety of existing cases which have sort of plagued a lot of startups. In a lot of startups in our community, there are founders who have raised like a small amount of 50 lakh, 1 crore angel, and they spend the money on building the product. They could not raise their subsequent round and had to unfortunately close down. And after a few years, they get the orders from the IT department to pay the taxes. So that was sort of a very sore point for a lot of founders, because after they have exhausted the money, they have to now spend their personal savings to fight these cases or to pay up taxes. So that was very unsettling point from a lot of people that that we speak to. And so what we are, and a lot of people are sort of curious to see as to how this translates to so many of the existing cases, as well as the future cases that might come up.
Yeah. So let me, in fact, go across to Prasoon and take forward that the point you've raised. We've heard from one founder, Prasoon, coming to you. You've had angel investors like Raman Roy, for example. You're backed by the founder of Helion, all of that. So having said that, what has been announced, how does Budget 2019 change the life of a founder like yourself?
So, personally, I believe that as all of us are talking about the intent of the government, so I personally have seen that when we today deal with the government departments like the railways and other places, there is certainly a lot of euphoria around the startups. Everybody is trying to promote the startups. In fact, if you have seen the recent notification around Home Ministry taking up electric vehicles as something that they would like to start within their own premises, along with Health Ministry issuing notification of only serving healthy food within all the ministries. I think these are some great initiatives which the government is taking. Although, personally, as far as the sector that we are in, which is food processing, is concerned, I believe that consumption, which everybody was talking about, which actually is the prime pillar for the growth of India over the next 5 years, as we are aiming to become a $5 trillion economy. I personally believe that something more could have been done around improving the entire consumption ecosystem. We have seen that China initially, for the last 20 years, rode upon that entire wave of consumption to be at where it is today. I believe consumption was kind of neglected. I was reading somewhere that consumption was mentioned only twice in the entire speech of Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman ma'am. Apart from that, I personally think that angel tax and all these issues, these are all regulatory issues which anyway the government has a very positive intent of solving. We do have a lot of these marquee investors who have invested in us, and they're all positive about how the ecosystem is being supported. Although I personally believe that consumption story, which everybody was looking forward to, hasn't been given that kind of impetus which it should have been given. So that is where the disappointment in the sector would lie. Although overall, it is extremely positive in terms of what government is trying to do for the startups today in India.
Okay, so I think the intent is very clear, and I think the intent of this government has been clear for the last 5 years. So Sharad, if I could come back to that, just look at this interesting point that Prasoon has made. And the fact is, you can't. How often can you isolate the new economy from the old economy? If you look at the blue chips, if you look at companies, the marquee FMCG companies, they're shown they're not recession-proof. So why should a company like Prasoon's, which is into healthy snacks, also not fear being recession-proof? So having said that, a very valid point that he's raised, that what has the budget 2019 done for consumption? What has it done to put more money in the hands of the middle class? Because it's not as if everybody on this panel and people like yourselves, you all have the same people that you're gunning for to make money, right? So if they don't have enough money in their wallet, all of you are going to struggle as well. Ashish, we're just going to reconnect with Sharad, so let me come to you. Very valid point that Prasoon has made. It's the same in catchment, whether you're a blue chip or you're a startup. You're going for that same, it's the same in catchment, right? So if you do nothing for consumption at a time when marquee blue chip FMCG companies have shown they're not recession-proof, it's not good news for the startup universe. Would you have wanted the budget 2019 to be less about incentives and more about maybe loosening the purse strings, making the middle class richer?
So I would like to subdivide this into 2 or 3 bullets. So on the first part, I definitely would like to say that there is this whole approach where they are trying to say that we'll try and make sure that we are going to invest significantly in some of the key areas, which will mean that there is going to be a fair bit of spend. A large part of it is going to be infrastructure, identifying or implementing newer means of transport which earlier would not have been exploited and used. And also some specific sectors would be given a thrust, which will mean that the overall roadblocks for infrastructure and growth would be cleared. If you look at the broad trend, we have reached a point where as a country, if we are not going to invest significantly in infrastructure creation and remedial measures to what the existing infrastructure is, it is going to be a bit of a challenge to sustain the growth rate. Where the budget scores fairly in its intent, and now we have to see how they actualize the whole thing on the ground. A little bit of improvement in terms of consumption by whatever marginal bit on the tax rate is not going to really suffice to bring a consumption-driven momentum. So I definitely take your point. But clearance of the NBFC hurdle does create a situation where credit is going to be available to a wider section of society. There is going to be a smoothing of the flow in which credit is going to be disseminated across various sections of the society. The fact that the government was focused around capitalization of banks and creating a better environment for NBFCs to come out of the current environment would definitely create a little better flow of capital, and that would in some sense benefit consumption. I would definitely agree if somebody were to argue with the point that this is not going to be directly beneficial. Yes, it's point well made. However, in the long run, it definitely helps. The other point that, and finally I would like to make is that there are 2 factors on consumption. One is lowering of tax rates, and the second one is improving, marginalizing through the GST rate structure. Both was not fully met with. One can only hope that they eventually take that up. But even if that does happen, consumption brings along with itself fundamental challenges of inflation. So one should factor that so far as there's a balance and infrastructure investment is being made, I think that should augment the economic growth.
Okay, so that's your views coming in. I believe Sharad Sharma is back with us. Sharad, we were talking about how the budget has failed to maybe enthuse and give a thrust on consumption. But you know what Nirmala Sitharaman also announced, some of those measures should make the fintech players at least very happy. For example, this entire thing on a 2% levy if you're going to withdraw more than 1 crore in cash from a bank account. Though I don't know how many people withdraw more than 1 crore rupees, in cash from a bank account. But having said that, the thrust on digital payments, if you've reached a certain threshold of a turnover, that should be good news coming in for the fintech companies.
Yeah, and there is much more in the pipeline. I mean, so the government had set up a committee. They had set up 2 committees. One was a payments committee under Nandan Nelikani, and the other was an MSME committee under UK SINA. And both the committees have given their reports, and broadly, I think there is agreement on the recommendations. So, you know, there is much in the pipeline. For example, there would be a new category of lightly regulated fintech player that would be introduced called the loan service provider. That's the recommendation of the UK SINA committee. I had the privilege to be part of that as well. So I know much more is coming. So for me, the disappointment is that, you know, budget was an opportunity to bring many of these things that are in the pipeline, you know, and push them out on an accelerated basis. And that hasn't happened. So, of course, you know, the good part is that it hasn't done much damage, and I think we should be grateful for that. I'm a little, you know, Ashish talked about angel tax, and I think that's a step in the right direction. But having worked on angel tax and iSpirit and, you know, IVCA, IN were the bodies that pushed very hard in the beginning, most of the angel tax issues have been done. You know, the only thing that this current budget does is take care of the people for whom there had been already orders that have been passed, right? And so, but the 90% of it what was done before the budget as well. So I feel that, you know, it probably because of paucity of time, it wasn't able to pull together the stuff that is already available, you know, on the buffet table of the government, in terms of you know, stuff that is mostly cooked, available on the table for startups, put it all together and push it out in the budget. And I think that did not happen. And it's clearly you know, a lost opportunity from that perspective. Having said that, I do agree with one of the panelists that was mentioning earlier that the intent of the government is to focus on startups. And if we can spend just 2 minutes to understand why. Let's take health as an example. You know, health is a major push by the government. Go ahead.
Yeah, healthcare was clearly conspicuous by absence in the budget speech. Having said that, you know, you've had that major announcement around Modi Care, Ayushman Bharat. You know, very recently, it's still being rolled out, is being hailed globally now as a big success. But, you know, I have to take a commercial break. I'm going to do that. And when we return, we're going to once again talk to the two founders that we've got on this panel about their verdict as far as Budget 2019 goes and what the budget can do to maybe encourage other people in the country to become founders. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the brand new Startup Central with me, Nayantara Rai. We're decoding India's first full-time woman finance minister's budget, her speech on Friday, what it means for the startup universe, whether you're an entrepreneur, founder, investor. We're decoding all of that. Before I go ahead, just a quick alert for all of you tuning in. Stay in touch with us. You know, we're the only show of its kind on Indian television dedicated to startups, entrepreneurship, innovation, disruption, technology, you name it, anything to do with the new economy. You can email us. I'm also on Twitter. Tell us what you want to see on the show, what you don't want to see on the show. You can even pitch to us and have a chance to be on Startup Central. Having said that, let me reintroduce my panelists to you. Shahid Sharma, the co-founder at iSpirit in our Bengaluru studio. Prasun Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Satwiko on Skype. He's also the charter member at TIE Delhi. We also have Neha Singh, the founder and CEO of Traxen, and Ashish Fafadia, the member of IVC and from Bloom Ventures. I'm going to come back to the founders that I've got on the panel with me. Neha, let me come to you first. You know, look at your own startup. You've got backing and the support of stalwarts like Ratan Tata himself. So having said that, you know, the basic direction which has been provided in the budget 2019, do you think it's going to enthuse people like yourself to say, it's worth it, let me take a risk, let me not become just another employee or a corporate, let me follow my vision? Or do you think that while we're talking about entrepreneurship, while we're talking about all of this, that thrust was perhaps lacking?
Sure. So in my opinion, a lot of founders like us don't look at the government for providing sort of incentives for the market that we want to go. I think what a lot of us look at the government for is to provide good infrastructure, which is similar to what Ashish was mentioning, and B is to provide sort of a level playing field. And by what I mean as a level playing field is that if a founder who is 2 years out of college is looking to do a startup, he should not be at a disadvantageous position than what a large corporate is when they are opening up a new business unit, for instance. And I think for that, it is very important, like, you know, the regulations that they have to deal with is one of the things that I have seen. So there are two risks typically in a startup. One is a business risk, and the other one is you know, your sort of other regulatory risk. So the business risk is a lot of founders are used to taking that and you know, coping up with that. But the regulatory is a little bit of a, you know, like a blind side, and their exceptions are more unsettling for founders. So I think here we do see there is some intention of easing the regulation.
Let me put it to you this way. Let me put it to you this way, and you know, just out of interest, did you watch the budget speech live?
Not the live, but I read through that. Now the point.
Prasun, you're smiling. Did you see it live? Is it of interest also to founders like yourself?
So I think perhaps all of us are kind of interested in first about the sectors we are working in, and secondly about the entire ecosystem that we belong to. So yes, I would say that I did not watch the entire speech. I did see the parts where, ma'am mentioned about the startups and the kind of incentives that she was trying to offer to the ecosystem. And apart from that, because the country is talking about farm distress, and one of the key areas where the focus has now, which the government is now trying to focus, is food processing. So I think these two sectors, which probably are kind of directly connected with us. These are two parts of the speeches which I personally saw. Apart from that, I think we get the synopsis and the highlights as well at Economic Times and other channels. So.
Okay. Okay, so having said that, Neha, let me just come back to you. There's, of course, now a super rich tax, as it's being called, if you have more than 2 crores as an individual. There have also been some rejigging when it comes to foreign portfolio investments, NRI investments. What is all of that going to mean for venture capitalists, angel investors? And, I'm asking you this because your startup is involved in connecting all of them together, the repository, as I spoke about. And having said that as well, if you put all of it together and the fact that you can now use your capital gains for an investment in a startup, does that suddenly make it more lucrative?
Yeah, so on the point of little bit increase in the capital gains that the tax slab which has happened for people whose income is more than 2 crore or more than 5 crore, I think there's a little bit of increase in that. So I think angels might have to sort of plan their sort of purchase based on or sale based on that. So I think overall there's a slight sort of this thing, but not something that kind of moved the needle.
Okay. Ashish, let me come to you. Now that you're going to see the super rich pay more in tax, but this is a super rich. I don't know how much of an impact it's going to have on their investment portfolio. But having said that, being offset by this capital gains exemption for investment in startups, does it look interesting? Do you think HNIs, ultra HNIs will look more at startups, especially when you look at the kind of returns that the mutual fund industry is giving?
So I don't think so. The fact that there is going to be a super rich tax, it should hurt the investment approaches of HNIs and the super rich, simply because of the fact that at the end of the day, startup investing is about bite-size investing. Most people who do invest in startups come with a certain time horizon in mind. So at this juncture, those of the HNIs who are already in the market would continue to play the investment approaches. And if it does, it may at best affect the quantum, but it definitely does not hurt them way beyond. In terms of the tax benefit to invest into startups, that was there and it stands to be continued for some more time. Honestly, there is a section of the crowd which definitely is happy about it. Per se, I don't think very strongly about it, only for the simple reason that people who have sold houses would not, it's not that it will go to channelize capital in a very significant way. There are a couple of other factors that the finance ministers in the past could have looked at, and I'm hoping seriously that Mrs. Sitharaman does take those into factor in the subsequent budgets. The best thing that you can do to encourage investment flow for the startup community, startups in general, and investment funds is to bring that as an asset class at par with the other asset classes. Today, you have liquid stocks on the stock exchanges, and you have shares in private limited companies which startups belong to. There's already a bit of a gap here. Traded stocks will always have a bit of a favor from the people who are participating. Now you have kept a very differential tax rate. Get that tax rate at par with the tax rate at par with listed players. That itself is going to be a big thrust. On the contrary, what has happened on that particular front is that because of the surcharge, the arbitrage between the private and the public stocks increases. I definitely feel strongly that the right way to go forward is to do two things. They make sure that, as I mentioned, tax rates are at par between both of these asset classes. And secondly, make it more easier and convenient for this category of people to participate into small funds of their choice. The finance minister would do well to recognize the fact that at the end of the day, if they make it convenient for people to channelize their wealth, it brings back wealth into India, which conventionally we have been missing out. Most of the startups, when they exit and they have a very significant foreign investor base as their shareholders, the only set of people who make money are going to be the founders and employees, and maybe a few people who have invested from India. We need to find ways and means to not necessarily incentivize or give tax exemptions, but at least give it parity with other asset classes and channelize those flows. This is something that I feel is not so tough and should be considered very seriously.
You know, that's a very valid point you're making. Neha, if I could come back to you on this. You know, we talk a lot about when the stock exchanges would be open to startups. You know, I think you only have really one prime example of a startup that went and didn't go for listing here also, which is Make My Trip. ESOPs is the currency of the startups as well. In this budget, for example, you know, a new idea was given that why not have a listing of CSR activities, social impact. You know, isn't this also very crucial, a miss of sorts? Because this will also make exits more profitable, as Ashish was just talking about, more lucrative.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add actually on to that, Nitara, that a lot of startups, when you see in India, are actually not sometimes incorporated in India. They are incorporated in Singapore or in US. And one of the reasons for that is that it's easier for, to tap into the other markets to list. So just on that sense, I think, just from the policy perspective of anything that kind of helps, I think, yes, there hasn't been much work on that. Glad to see some of the companies like IndiaMart recently got listed, but there are very few examples. As much as, our this much level of venture ecosystem in India, should see. So ideally, we should be seeing much more. So there hasn't been much, activity or much sort of talk about that.
You know, I'm going to, in a lighter note, say that maybe Nirmala Sitharaman has seen Startup Central, that in her budget speech, she actually spoke about having a TV program for startups, dedicated to startups and venture capitalists. Prasun, when she talks about that and such a show on Doordarshan, is there even a market for it for all of you? Because she says it'll be a show by the startups. So, like, what, are you guys going to be, like, getting into production? Like, what is all of that about? And what has been the reaction to that?
So as far as the reaction goes, I believe that I think what government is trying to do is trying to take that entire startup ecosystem from the tier 1 and tier 2 towns to even a small village where in India, we have entrepreneurs at every corner of the country. The number of entrepreneurs which India produces, per square kilometer, I would probably say is bigger than any other country in the world. So I think they're trying to promote this entire ecosystem even at the grassroots. So I think it's a great initiative. Similar kind of initiatives were in the past started for agriculture, for education. And if the government is trying to start something focused on entrepreneurship, I believe that this is where the grassroots approach of the government is visible. As far as the how is this going to happen, I don't have a clarity on that. But recently, for example, the government of Delhi, they have invited the entrepreneurs in Delhi to actually, conduct classes at the government Delhi government schools, and the people have actually come forward in our entire ecosystem here in Delhi NCR. So I personally believe that people like Sharat Sharma sir and people of his kind are anyway involved at a very different level with the startups. So taking these kind of people to even the last mile entrepreneur through this TV channel would be a phenomenal idea. Execution is yet to be seen, so even we are waiting for that.
Sharad, I'll come to you now. You just heard Prasun toss that to you, saying, it's to get people, to get entrepreneurs engaging with you. You already know a lot about it. What did you make of that? And you can juxtapose it maybe of Nirmala Sitharaman's other idea, which is to have a Davos-like event in India, the Global Investor Forum. That's also good news for startups.
Yeah, so, this government is really good at doing events, and I think that is helpful. It mobilizes energy, and we should do all of that. But by itself, it's not going to change the outcomes on the ground. They're amplifiers. So they're amplifiers, and they're very effective if something else is happening, that's worthy of amplification. And I think, so that groundwork, I belong to that group of people who believe that we are not doing enough to actually leverage the entrepreneurial energy that is already there in the country. And to be able to leverage that, clearly startups, they can't afford lawyers, CAs. So if at all we have to focus on ease of business, doing business, they are the ones, they have to be the benchmark. If it's not easy for startups, it's we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back for ease of doing business. Angel tax was just one example, but there are 33 other items on the Stay in India checklist. Neha mentioned that a large number of Indian startups actually are not Indian. They're domiciled outside India. And when they do become successful, let's say when Flipkart did become successful, much of that money and value does not accrue back to India. And the reason why startups redomicile is because we have these stupid laws and irritants that were that kind of force startups to go to jurisdictions that are more palatable to them. So there are 34 items that have been there in the Stay in India checklist. We are in the 4th year of that. Out of those 34 items, yes, about 19, 20 of them have been addressed. 14 need to be addressed. And, many of us hoped that 6, 7, 8 of them would be addressed, and frankly not even one got addressed, because I don't count angel tax as having been addressed. This was already done prior to the budget itself. So I think this is one angle.
But also, why only say that startups domicile is elsewhere? Ashish, let me come to you. Some of the blue chip companies, they have so many sub companies downstream. Their domicile is not India. Remember the entire P-note issue, which also happened a couple of years ago. Having said that, Ashish, if I could come to you about the budget, maybe creating new avenues or new opportunities that could exist for founders, or have I got that wrong? Look at digital payments, giving a new thrust to it. Fintech, where Nirmala Sitharaman herself is talking about facelessness. Why is that not an opportunity? There was, I felt, a big thrust provided to 2 areas, EVs as well as fintech.
So, in terms of EVs as well as fintech, I think you're definitely right. They've also tried to have this aspiration where they're saying we will get higher education into India, where they're trying to make sure that India does become a hub where overseas students are going to come and study here. So I think there is that attempt to make some of these differences, and all of these items have an ability to impact on both sides. When it comes to EV, I think that was fairly holistically dealt with. They're not only trying to bring that
Ashish,
GST rate down from 12 to 5. They're giving investment.
Ashish, I want to come in on the education part. Ashish, I want to come on the education part. Luckily, I don't have children. I don't worry about school admission and college admission, but someone who's been through the process. Now you want foreign students to also compete. We have a quota system. You look at DU, you look anywhere else, you have to get 99.9%. Now suddenly foreign students also have to be without increasing infrastructure. So I personally feel that, let's instead maybe look at Coursera, Udemy type applications for higher education. Not really right now with the infrastructure we have.
Fair point. I'll come to it once I finish the point on the EV and the fintech. I'll definitely come back to it if that's okay. So on the EV front, I think they went holistically, where they did work on the multiple sides, giving investment-linked benefits to the people who are going to invest into EV. And again, some of these things are having the right vision to create the vertical grounds up. When you talk about fintech, it's not only about just levying taxes and surcharges on people who are going to withdraw cash in excess of 1 crore. It's also about the background and the overall stack that they're going to prepare. And that is where there have been organizations like Sharazai Spirit and a few others who have been pretty active in backing up. So they have been very receptive. So yes, I definitely feel that they are taking steps in the right direction to create the remove the infrastructural bottlenecks. However, I do concur with the discussions on the panel that there can be so much more that can be done. It's not about just overall ease of doing business as a ranking. It's about what we do on the ground so that people get the benefits of these and not just merely fill check boxes to bring the ratings down. I think those steps on the ground also should be assessed. We do say that companies can be incorporated faster. However, it's not so. We are not getting to see some of these implemented.
Of course, that's a fair point that you're making over there, that, it has to go beyond the ease of doing business ranking, which, let's face it, is only based on the performance of two cities, New Delhi and Mumbai. Prasoon, if I could now come to you. Your entire business is also based on getting India healthier, fitter, health snacks. There's so much talk about retail, food processing. When it comes to food, I'm sure you have your hands full also of keeping the traders happy. Having said that, Nirmala Sitharaman also promised to liberalize FDI rules, ease local sourcing. Good news?
Well, of course, these are some good positive steps. In fact, there's another addition to that. I think they've introduced the pension scheme for somebody who opens a retail shop. So that in a way is also trying to, create more entrepreneurs into retail. So overall, yes, this is very positive in terms of, the FDI being eased and retailers being kind of promoted using pension as a scheme. But, on one side, focusing on the companies to kind of grow, focusing on the market to grow, I think the spend has to be there. We have seen that over the last 2 years, the stocks of not just the large FMCG companies, even the smaller consumer companies, they are not seeing that kind of upsurge in the growth of the consumption. This was being talked about. Rural consumption was being talked about. But I believe that infrastructure support, where they are trying to build highways, they're trying to focus on connecting the villages. This would add to the consumption, but the money has to be seen in that entire consumption cycle, which somehow will only happen once, when we are able to solve a lot of these ground issues in terms of taxation and, small startups, not just the startup angel tax. We face a lot of other issues, including GST. The laws are not clearly laid out. So I think one of the
come on, GST is an issue. Come on, GST. I'm all for ease of doing business, but I'm also all for everybody paying tax. Everybody has to pay GST. Just because you're a startup doesn't mean you can't pay a GST, and it's part of GST, life as well, where you have to learn how to fill out those forms. Come on, let's be very clear on that. No, I'm not going to let you.
No, startups are anyway.
You all have to also learn. It's called life. When we were kids, we had to learn how to fill checkbooks. You guys have to learn how to do GST.
All I'm trying to say is
let me come to you. Insurance intermediaries.
The startups are anyway, extremely happy to pay their taxes. The ease of tax paying has to be there. You would not believe that every month the kind of returns we have to file.
You want to cater, you want to be big boys in the real world, you got to do it like the real world and like everybody else. You can't have simpler GST rules just because you're a startup. Neha, let me come to you. FDI, insurance intermediaries.
Sorry, go ahead.
FDI and insurance intermediaries being allowed. Is that a game changer of sorts? You talk about India's insurance penetration, you talk about healthcare, you talk about all of this. Insurance is, of course, a very small penetration. How important is this? And again, good news for startups and fintech?
Yes, to some extent. Because insurance is, as you rightly mentioned, it's very underpenetrated in India. And the number of instruments that are available is sort of pretty minimal in India today, and insurance as such can have more complex products, etc. So I think with opening of FDI, it will encourage some of the more funding, at least to these players. So yes, it should be a positive.
We're running out of time. I began by asking this question, and I'm not going to stand for things like disappointing, balanced. I'm going to put you all in a corner. You all have to do it. Let me tell you that when I was anchoring from Confederation for Indian Industry, the CI panel in New Delhi, they all rated it. Now it's the turn for 4 of you to rate the union budget on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. Sharad Sharma, 1 to 10.
3 out of 10. It's a budget where very little is being brought to the surface. Omissions dominate. It could have easily picked many things that are already cooked or nearly cooked and accelerated their deployment in the ecosystem. And if it did that, this budget would have got a higher rating than it does from me, right? Than 3, that what I'm willing to give it right now.
So Sharad Sharma of the Ice Parade giving it 3 out of 10. He's told you why. Ashish, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest.
I would say 5, but if it sounds like a midpoint, I'll make it 4.8 for the sake of indicating the orientation.
Neha, scale of 1 to 10, what's your rating? What's your verdict?
So I would rate it 5, more so because of the fact that there is good intent, and now we also want to see is how all of these kind of pan out in reality.
Prasoon, I know you don't like to pay, you have a problem with those GST forms, they're very cumbersome, but rate your budget 1 to 10.
I would say it 4 because of the lack of focus on consumption.
Okay, so that's the verdict for you folks. We got you 4 experts on the panel. That's the verdict that is coming in from a whole host of founders, investors as well. And I'd like to thank all 4 of you for joining us on this very special edition of Startup Central and being candid. I will point out, though, that all of you, unlike the blue chips, are far more candid. They're usually more diplomatic. So for that, I'd like to thank all 4 of you. And with that, folks, we're completely out of time. Many thanks for tuning in. Remember, you can stay in touch with us. The email address on your screen. I'm also on Twitter. Write to us. Tell us what you want to see on the show. Tell us what you definitely don't want to see on the show. That's as important. You can also pitch to us. Maybe be a part of Startup Central. Thanks for watching.